This is Sky World News Review and Business Report with Philippa Hall.
These are the top stories. Rod Blagojevich, the former Illinois governor who tried to sell the Senate seat vacated by Barack Obama, has been found guilty on one count of corruption, but the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict on 23 other counts. The UN says it's received just 40% of the almost $460 million in aid that Pakistan desperately needs to deal with the floods crisis. And the former Israeli soldier who posted pictures of herself on Facebook posing with bound and blindfolded Palestinian prisoners says she's surprised at the outcry it's caused. More now on the floods in Pakistan. Sadia Bungard of the charity Save the Children is on the line now from Islamabad. Good morning, Sadia. Thank you very much for joining us. You've teams spread out across the affected areas. What are they telling you about the situation there?
Hi, good morning. The situation is still very, very bad. We've got large populations in small areas. In the cities, in the south, you've got a heat of about 50 to 55 degrees, and the water is just stagnant. Coupled with that, we've got a lot of people who've come with their animals. So you've got animals and people living in very small areas. We've got about 9 million children who are affected by this flood. That's about half the population. 3.5 million children are directly in danger of malnutrition and acute diarrhea. And as you know, it takes one day for a child to die of diarrhea, and that is just unacceptable. We've already seen cases of starvation of children, and this is going on across the country. We're seeing children very badly starved.
Now, the general consensus really is that aid is failing to keep up with those rising water levels. Are you getting the donations you need to provide the aid, and is that aid getting to where it needs to be?
Well, you know, this is the biggest sudden onset emergency that we've ever seen, and no country in the world could cope with this level and magnitude of disaster. At present, the floods are covering an area the size of England. The other thing that's hampering our efforts is access. A lot of the infrastructure has been washed away, so it's making it very difficult to reach remote areas. But funding is also a big issue. All aid agencies, all major aid agencies are saying they're running very low on stock, and unless we get funding, this will massively slow down our relief efforts.
And you mentioned the 3.5 million children at risk of the waterborne diseases. That's what the UN have been saying. What about the children whose parents, they've maybe been separated from their parents, or indeed their parents may have died and they've lost them? Do you deal with them as well? Absolutely.
Actually, that's one of the areas of concern for us, and it's very major from what we're hearing from our field staff. Lots of children have been separated. They're placed in host communities. And all of this puts them at risk of trafficking and other form of abuse. So we're very, very concerned for their well-being. So it's one of the top priorities for us also.
Sadia Bungard from Save the Children charity, thank you very much for joining us from Islamabad. Now let's cross to Summit TV.
Good morning, I'm Samir Zaki from Summit TV. Here's a look at how the bourses were lost trading across the African continent. In southern Africa, Botswana's domestic index was marginally weaker. The oil share in South Africa gained 0.33%, but the LUSE in Zambia fell 0.36%. Moving to West Africa now, Ivory Coast Composite was 0.04% firmer. The Nigerian oil share added 0.29%. In East Africa, Kenya's NSE was almost 1% stronger. The Mauritian Semdex just a touch firmer, and Uganda's Composite fell 0.84% on the day. Let's take a look at the currencies now. In Southern Africa, US dollar buys you 6.70 Botswana Pula, 7.25 South African Rands, and 4,886 Zambian Kwacha. In West Africa, you pay 1.41 Ghanaian cedi a dollar, more than 502 Ivory Coast francs, and over 147 Nigerian naira for the greenback. Finally, in East Africa, you'll get 76 Kenyan shillings for a dollar, 29 Mauritian rupees, and 2,179 Ugandan shillings for $1 US. A look at what's making business news on the African continent. Starting off in South Africa, and the country's moved to calm investor nerves, Mines Minister Susan Shabangu has ordered an urgent overhaul of the Mining Act. She's also put a stop on all new prospecting applications from next month. The move comes after sharp criticism from the country's miners. That's after the likes of Kumba and Lonmin fell foul to recent prospecting awards. The DMR awarded rights to companies belonging to those with close ties to President Zuma, including his son. Still, the overhaul will come as cold comfort, as any changes made won't be retrospective. Kumba and Lonmin are currently in court fighting those decisions. South Africa's wool supplies have been banned from selling to their biggest overseas customer, China. The blame is being pinned on an outbreak of the potentially deadly Rift Valley fever. The mosquito-borne virus is spreading in South Africa. It mainly affects domestic livestock, but it's already killed several people as well. China wants certification that the wool comes from areas free of the virus, and South Africa can't guarantee that. China is the only country that requires this certification. Last year, it bought South African wool worth nearly $130 million. American group Anadarko Petroleum has reportedly struck oil off the coast of Mozambique. That's according to Mineral Resources Minister Esperança Bias. It made the discovery off the coast of the northern province of Cabo Delgado. Anadarko was granted exploration rights 4 years ago. It must still check whether tapping the oil is commercially viable. And taking a look at news in brief now, Africa's biggest bourse, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, raised first half net profits by 13.1% to just over $28 million. Zimbabwe is set to double gold output this year to around 8.05 tons. That's according to its mining chamber. Nigeria is to raise $1.3 billion through bonds. It's to use the money to revive its ailing automobile industry. And Kenya Commercial Bank says first half net income increased to $35 million from $29 million a year earlier. I'm Samezake, that's your African business news. It's back to you in London.
More sport for you later on, but next is the Africa weather forecast.
The Cape will be cool with cloud and rain pushing up from the south, but the bulk of southern Africa will be fine. There'll be a fair amount of cloud over central Mozambique, however. To the east, the Seychelles will see showers, and there'll be 1 or 2 for eastern Madagascar, but the bulk of Madagascar will be fine. In the equatorial zone, meanwhile, the usual storms will be fairly equally spread, but Somalia will be mainly dry, although there'll be some showers around the Gulf of Aden. The Kenyan coast may catch the odd shower too. You're watching Sky World News now. Let's take another look at some of our top stories.